Hi, we're Biscuit Wolf Games, and we're here to talk to you about how we created two treasure sets for the Jam of the Timescape, Anathema and Apparel of the Brawler. I'm B.
And I'm Austin, both co-founders, co-designers, and so that's why we ended up with two treasures to bring to the Jam of the Timescape. But we thought it'd be interesting to go through our process for how we ended up developing this for anyone else who's looking at maybe developing some homebrew stuff, looking at publishing some of their own materials, and just kind of get into our thought process. And, maybe there's something someone can glean from this.
I would hope so, but we'll find out.
So I put together a list of questions for us to help keep us on task. And our very first question is, why did we choose to enter?
Well, we actually have been working off and on a Hypercube adventure for Draw Steel, using the Draw Steel rules. You don't need to know what a Hypercube is for this. We'll explain that much later. But we thought it would be fun to play around with some of the mechanics for Draw Steel in a much smaller setting to kind of get some of the kinks ironed out before we made a larger module.
Right, and plus, game jams are fun, and it was just interesting to see the lead designer of Draw Steel kind of repost this on Blue Sky, and we'd been playing a little bit of Draw Steel, and so we had a rough idea of how that was going to feel, but it felt like a challenge.
Yeah, we cannot turn down a challenge. It is not in our blood, unfortunately.
So the purpose of this game jam was to create a collection of leveled treasures. Draw Steel goes from level 1 to 10, and there's a number of leveled treasures already set within the game, where they have certain powers when you're level 1. Once you reach level 5, I think it is, you unlock new stuff, and then level 9 unlocks the last tier of abilities. And specifically what they wanted from this particular game jam is they wanted a set of 3 items that are all built to work together. And so there's a unit bonus as well, which creates some interesting things because the way Draw Steel works is you have these kits. And so we had to make sure all of our items would work within these kits. So one character could actually equip everything.
Yeah, while we were designing these, we did really want to focus on keeping these class neutral. We wanted to make sure that no matter what your kit was, no matter what your class was, you could find something interesting in either the apparel of the brawler or in Anathema that would be useful to you or even just another character in your party.
Going into how we actually settled on our things, do you want to describe Anathema first? That was kind of your baby.
So the way we went about this is we made a big long list of groups of 3 that we thought might be cool, right? Like, I think one of the ones we had was like a helmet, a sword, and a set of armor. We did end up going with that one. But the trio that kind of struck my interest was the idea of a bell, book, and a candle. This is something that gets thrown around a lot in Magic media, but it wasn't until I started looking into it that I realized it is a ancient Catholic rite called anathema. Today, we think of anathema as the opposite of something. So you could say that the sun is the anathema of the moon, but it used to be a very specific ritual of exorcism that could only be performed by an extremely high-level bishop or the pope. So in the creation of anathema, I wanted to use a bell, a book, and a candle, but I also wanted to make them do the opposite of what you would expect those items to do. So a candle that creates darkness, or a bell that creates silence. Going off of that, I then started looking at other leveled treasures within the book to kind of get a vibe set of what should be included at each level, how powerful, what kind of tweaking we might need to do, and then kind of worked backwards from there. Was that how it kind of went for you with Apparel of the Brawler, since you kind of focused on that one?
Yeah, so like you said, we actually came up with about 5 to 7 other possibilities and just kind of like went after whatever grabbed us the most. So one of the things we had was like a Time Raider set that was meant to go with, I think it was like the Giosamer, if I'm pronouncing that right, the polearm user.
Guillarm.
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 It's French. There's way more letters than there need to be. But looking at a lot of that stuff, a lot of it felt very classical fantasy, sword, shield, cloak, helm sort of thing. And so I wanted to find something a little bit different. And there's an item that's actually already in the book, that's like the hand wraps of something. And it's meant for like the pugilist and martial arts kits, which don't have any equipment naturally. And so I decided to take that kind of theme and expand upon it a little bit. And that's where I really got hooked in. At first, it was much more martial arts oriented, with the idea of, all these various past trainers having their spirit kind of infused into the items. But as I began working through it in the process of ideating what the abilities were going to be and stuff, I found myself more drawn towards modern martial arts movies like Monkey Man, Nobody, The Raid. Even Sisu's not really a martial arts movie, but it has that same core. This sort of like backed into a corner desperation of someone. And so the idea of these items having the spirits of those who had died wearing it, that also spoke to me, especially as someone who's also a fan of Berserk, where the titular Berserk armor lets you move past your human limits and fight past death even. Taking some sort of thematic influence from that as well and putting that in here really just kind of like spoke to me.
Yeah, no, we both also leaned very spooky on this one. I think because Draw Steel as a system does lend itself very well to kind of crunch, kind of things that are a little bit eerie, things that mechanically feel a little bloodthirsty. And I feel like both of our sets kind of lean against that in an interesting way, though from two different directions.
Yeah. And it's something that's not necessarily tied to a specific class either, because obviously the Fury is the first thing you're going to think of with the Brawler, and that's a very natural synergy, but it also works very well with a Null and a Tactician as well, if you want to get a little bit more of that maybe Fury flavor into another character.
The other thing that was required for this jam was that when the three items are brought together, they do a new unique thing. And I think with both of our item sets, we really wanted to make it a little bit of risk reward. You can see this if you download either file, but both of them have benefits and consequences to uniting all three of these items in ways that I think are really interesting.
Right. So yeah, I suppose this will be an easy thing to, as we transition to talk about how we balance the items, because that was very tied into ideating what we wanted them to actually do. So looking at the mechanics of Draw Steel, a lot of the fun in the game is from the tactical combat. So you're going to be pushing people, pulling people towards you, getting shoved yourself, and gaining surges to do more power. Like, there's a lot of mechanics that make the tactical combat really the core of it. That is, if you don't like the tactical combat, you're not going to like Draw Steel. That's the end of it. So as I was looking for abilities for the Apparel of the Brawler, I was going through a lot of the similar leveled treasures to see what sort of power level we were dealing with. And some of it is kind of obvious stuff where it was, like, I'm not going to have something give you 10 surges or do plus 30 damage because that's way out of sync with stuff. But it was interesting to see. I'd be very curious to see the design notes that Matt and James and the whole crew were using, because I want to see what they actually decided to use for each tier to set the power. But there's also a lot of stuff in there that was just kind of like neat. There was one particular armor that was made from the pages of 1,000 books or something. It allows you to become paper thin and slide through cracks in the wall and like engulf enemies. It's very cool and very thematic, but it's something that when you're thinking about balance, I don't know how you would rank that versus, giving someone an extra 10 feet of movement, right?
Yeah, one of the things I find really interesting about Draw Steel is, despite how tactically it is focused, I would say it has very much inherited the tactical dungeon crawly, very mechanics influenced parts of D&D. It doesn't keep them from just being weird and having fun. There are so many things in the book itself that we based our balance upon that are just weird or fun, or like clearly somebody had a weird idea that they pitched at some point and everybody else thought it was cool enough to include. I think that a lot of tactical systems are afraid of also being cool, and Draw Steel does not suffer from that issue whatsoever. And so it was both easy and hard to balance these. I think Austin had to do 2 or 3 passes on Anathema before everything kind of synced up. I ended up doing, I think, 1 pass or 2 on Apparel of the Brawler just to make sure that numbers looked correct. But the crunch itself is really interesting within the system.
Yeah, and I think this is also something that a lot of designers can get themselves hung up on, is trying to get the math exactly right. And from my experience of playing dozens of different games, some more combat oriented, some less combat oriented, there can be kind of guidelines that you want to fit within, but really there's a lot of playroom in the middle there, because it's never going to always be the same combat. Things change all the time, and there's a lot of room for GM rulings too. If someone handles the the prone condition differently, or makes a house rule, whatever, that can change a huge outcome of battle. If it takes an extra action or something like that, or it's easier to get knocked prone, or whatever happens. And especially in a game like Draw Steel, where the director is spending malice, which makes the combat really swingy, because it lets you do cool stuff, but there's not like a hard balance as to, at the top of turn 3, the game master's going to have 8 malice, and so they're going to use it on these things. No, that's like, it's all up in the air. And so, yeah, balance is a very broad target to hit, and you kind of have to give the tools to the game master running the game, using your materials to tweak it as they need at the table in the moment.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I always think of rules as kind of a suggestion, particularly when it comes to hard numbers. If somebody comes across Apparel of the Brawler or Anathema and is like, I love this, but I wish the number was bigger or smaller or for a slightly different effect, go nuts. Like, you have my express permission. Go hog wild. You should. You should be going hog wild as a player and a GM. Push this limit, push these sets to their tests. Make them go as far as you think they can go.
You do not have my permission. I will call the cops.
This is an anti-carceral show, Austin. I will come to your house. Don't make me make you do the layout.
You're going to call the tabletop
time.
cops.
Don't make me make you do the layout next time. Which also, speaking of, you did some art for this one. Normally I handle most of the layout and art, but you dipped your toe in this time. How'd that go?
Yeah, so this is something I've messed with a little bit. I'm not a graphic designer, but I've done a little bit of photoshopping here and there. And so what I did for the artwork, and I'll probably make a longer video about this in the future, is I took Creative Commons images, famous paintings, pictures from museums like the Smithsonian, Wiki Commons images, everything that's public domain, put it into GIMP and just ran a couple of filters over it, honestly, up the contrast, ran it through an oil painting filter, and kind of blurred the edges a little bit to make it easier to place within the final layout. And that was that, because I think it got the gist of what was going across, as cool as it is to be able to have like custom artwork for everything. I haven't taken an art class in years. I wouldn't trust myself to draw, and even then I'm stuck with like pencil on paper, and then getting that to port into a digital document, make that look nice. It's a whole bunch of skills that I don't have right now, and this was a quick and easy way to get that done.
Quick is one word, easy becomes another. I also used I am a big fan of the Smithsonian, the Getty, the Met. A lot of museums have publicly available either public use, free use, or Creative Commons 0 assets that you can use, some of which I grabbed for Anathema. The rest of Anathema is just text layout. That very evocative cover image is just text. It just scrubbed my brain the right way, and once I had it laid out, I was like, let's go with this. The other thing, too, is you say you just did a little bit of art for this, but I do think you deserve a little more credit than that, because you have been working on your layout brain. Austin was the one who had the idea to... I can't remember the name of the painting. I'm sure Austin is putting it on screen now, because I love giving him more editing work. Mm-hmm. But this beautiful painting of a gladiator looking up at a crowd. And so what we did was put the crowd at the top of the paper and the gladiator at the bottom, which was all Austin's idea. Very fun. I'm just glad to see you developing your layout brain so that I have a little, I get to take a little breaky sometimes. A little breaky.
Yeah, so yeah, also this was using Affinity, if anyone wants to know.
Yes. We do our layout in Affinity. I do my photo editing in Affinity. The photo editing specifically for Anathema is based on the Bladesify photo tutorial from Dissonance. Fantastic little package you can get yourself on itch.io. Highly recommend if you want to create that kind of style of photo. But we are big fans of Affinity in this household.
And specifically, this was also a bit of a challenge because there's a lot of text happening here too, between 3 items with 3 different parts of description, because they each have a new ability every time you get to the different tiers. And then a 4th item with the combined abilities, at level 1, level 5, whatever it was. So this is a lot of text, and we were limited to 2 pages to fit all this in.
We had a maximum of 2 pages, and I think we ended up having a little bit of a debate because Apparel of the Brawler, you will see, has some really lovely lore with it. Highly recommend going and checking that out. But Anathema has almost nothing with it. Like, it's a very minimalist text, to use my academic brain, because I kind of just wanted to keep it that way. And we went back and forth for a while about whether or not that was going to be a good fit for this jam in particular. The jam results are not out at time of recording. I think we're recording on the 1st. Not
yes.
To out you. You can cut that out if you want, Austin. But not to kiss and tell. But we are recording on the 1st, and we have not seen the results of the jam yet. So we'll see kind of how this all shakes out. But I felt like it was very interesting to have 2 different approaches to this jam. One more minimalist, one a little bit more text heavy.
Right. And while I'm thinking of layout images too, the background that you used for Apparel of the Brawler, was that one of the ceiling papers?
That one is just beige, baby. So if you have looked at or purchased our costume guide, which Austin is also putting on screen now because I love to torture him, you will notice that the background is not just beige, it is vaguely textured. And what that is Victorian ceiling paper. I will actually be doing a full-length video about this on the channel, about how I personally go about and think about layout as a designer. But it's important to note that these free resources, free use, public use, CC0, are not only just all over, but can be used in places you wouldn't expect. Like Faded to, I think with the costume document, it's at 35% opacity over a white background under drawings that I redid at about 85 to 90% opacity. The numbers really don't matter. The point here is futz with your opacity until it looks the way you like it. A lot of design is just futzing until you find something that looks the correct way in your brain. And that's something you have to develop over time. But it is something that once you get used to it, becomes easier and easier.
All right. So at the end of it, how do we feel about each of our entries here?
I feel good, but I also feel like I wish I had a little bit more time. I think if I was going to do this jam again, I would have said, let's focus on just building one of these 2 options out. Creating 2 items in 2 weeks was definitely a lot more stressful than I had anticipated while working a full-time job. It just happens to be busy season in the industry that I'm in. So there was a little bit of back and forth and a little bit of last-minute things. But I am actually happy with the final product, though when I uploaded it, I did shut my computer down and just walk away, which is sometimes the best thing to do when you're submitting a document.
Yeah. There is a very fine line towards, like, perfectionism and just, like, tinkering with every little bit and making it look as good as it possibly can and using that almost as a form of procrastination. I think it's Hank Green, one of the Greens, has a rule of doing everything to 80% completion and then it's done, and then you don't go back to it. And while that's not necessarily best for everyone, I think it's a good general idea to keep in mind.
I also am a firm believer in the idea of leaving a little mistaken, not something that impacts the text, but something that kind of lets the ghost out, for lack of a better term. This is an old superstition that comes from things like knitting, crochet, sewing. Of like, you should leave a little mistaken. Nothing should ever be perfect because otherwise ghosts will get stuck in there. And I find that the more that I hyperfixate on something being perfect, the more that it gets stuck in me. So I don't know, maybe there's some truth to that.
Yeah. And I think you learn so much more if you were to, I don't know, if we're talking about building birdhouses, for example. If you were to build 50 birdhouses, you will know so much more about how to build a birdhouse than someone who tries to make one perfect one and agonizes over each detail.
Yeah.
Right? Just going through the process of doing it again and again and again, it gives you more freedom, and I think part of that's maybe because you're not carrying the idea of what the original is supposed to be, of what maybe you originally conceived of it as. Because if you're constantly starting from a blank page again and again, you can get more experimental. You can realize from your last experience, oh well, this technique ended up kind of interesting. What if I did this? And then see how that works or doesn't.
Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this was just a quick little thing we wanted to put out. You guys can check out, we have links to everything we talked about down below. And, yeah, we'll see you next time.
See you around.